everyone, namaste, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Hi, if you're new here, this is Amisha Singh Chauhan, and if you're looking for something fun, dark and mysterious, then you're at the right place. So do not forget to subscribe to my channel and also hit that bell icon so that every time I'm here with a new case to talk about, you'll get to know about it. Yes, I know I am dressed in Indian traditional clothes. I'm also wearing Indian jewelry. The reason behind this is because Diwali is right around the corner. I think the day we're going to post this is going to be Diwali. So happy Diwali to all of you. May this new year bring a lot of joy and a lot of light in your life. Be healthy, wealthy, and may all your wishes and dreams come true. Only the good ones. I don't know, the true crime addict in me gets triggered when somebody says that. Just imagine if somebody says this to a serial killer, like all your wishes come true. No, we definitely do not want that. And I'm so sorry about the noise outside because even if Diwali is in 2 days, people have started celebrating. So anyways, let's get started and let's start with what we are here for. Today we are going to talk about one of the darkest cases I've ever heard of. I don't have a measurement scale that, this case is on 1 and this one is on 10 or 11.5, but this one is really dark, especially for me because one family, 11 people, 11 members of 3 different generations, they die. And even if the case is solved, it is still unsolved because there are so many questions that are unanswered, and it is one of the most bizarre, dark and scariest cases I've ever heard of. I'm talking about the Burari Case. Now, the Chundawats were originally from Rajasthan's Chittorgarh, but in the early years, they were living in Tohana of Haryana. Now, somewhere in 1989 and 1990, the Chundawats moved from Haryana to the capital city of India, that is Delhi. They moved to this northern part of Delhi called Burari area in Santnagar. Now, the head of the family was Bhopal Singh, who was married to Narayani Devi. And together they had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. Now, in the Burari house only lived Bhavnesh, who is the second son, with his wife Savita and their 3 kids, Neetu, Menaka and Dhruv. And then the youngest son, Lalit, who was married to Tina, and they had a son together, Shivam. Also lived Pratibha, who was a widow, and she had a daughter, Priyanka. Now, everything in the family was going well. In fact, very recently, they also celebrated Priyanka's engagement, that is on 17th of June 2018. And like I said, for an outsider, everything was perfect until 1st of July 2018. In the wee hours of 1st of July 2018, Guru Charan Singh, one of their neighbors and friends, as usual, he decided to go out for a morning walk. And he would be every day accompanied by Lalit, the youngest son of Bhopal Singh and Narayani Devi. But that day, Lalit did not turn up. So he was like, okay, let's just go continue with the walk. When he returned back from the walk, he noticed that the general store, the grocery store of the Chundawats, which was on the ground floor of their house, was still closed. And usually, this store would open somewhere around 5:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. He also noticed that there were milk crates outside, so that meant that nobody had come downstairs and picked them up. Now, all of these circumstances made him really worried and concerned, especially in regards with Lalit. So, being a good neighbor and a friend, he decided to go upstairs and check on them. Now, when he was going to knock on the door, that is when he noticed that the door was actually opened. It wasn't locked from inside. Again, a red flag. Now, he opens the door, he went straight to the first floor, and the moment he reached the top of the stairs of the first floor, he saw that 10 of the 11 members of the Chundawat family were hanging from the ceiling. Now, the ceiling was an open area basically, and they had a lot of railings and bars, and these people, they were hanging from a scarf, from a dupatta. Now, the moment he saw this, he ran downstairs, he alerted everyone, and he immediately dialed 100 and told the police about it. This was around 7:15 a.m. By 7:18 a.m., Burari's beat officer arrived at the scene. Now, this police officer had no idea about the intensity of what he was going to see or witness. And the moment he got upstairs, for a second or two, it took him to realize what exactly was he seeing. And when it all sunk in, he got so scared, he literally ran downstairs and he called his seniors because he was alone. And obviously, I think nobody can be prepared to see what they actually saw. Also, there's a leaked video out on the internet. It is very difficult to be found, and I recommend you all to not check it out, but I still want to mention it because one of the neighbors or the friends who arrived before the police did, they actually shot the entire video, and It's creepy. I've seen some clips of it and it literally is a perfect package for a nightmare. Anyways, back to the case. When the investigators arrived, by 12 a.m., there were literally thousands and thousands of people in that area. There were politicians. In fact, the Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, also arrived. He checked the entire scene. And also a lot of leaders from the opposition party. There were media personnel. It was a chaos. It was blunder. And the families arrived too, as in Dinesh, the oldest brother, he arrived from Rajasthan. And even the sister, Sujata, who was not living with the family in the Burari house, arrived at the scene. Now, like I mentioned earlier, that only 10 people were hanging from the ceiling. So where was the 11th person? The 11th person was Narayani Devi, the senior of the house. She was found dead on the floor of an adjacent room, and it looked like that she had been strangulated as well. And their bodies were sent for autopsy, which was very important because they wanted to know the cause of death. In various cases, it has happened that somebody actually poisons the victims and then make it look like a suicide. So that could have been a possibility. Also, a side note over here, when the police officers arrived, they found that not only they were hanging from the ceiling, from the bars, but also most of their faces were covered from a cloth. And later on, we would find out that all of these cloths were cut out from a single cloth, like a huge single cloth. Also, they were blindfolded, they were gagged, there were cotton balls in their ears, their hands and their feet were tied. Now, in the autopsy, nothing sheepish came out, as in it pretty much was what we were all seeing, like these people died because of hanging. And with Narayani Devi, yes, she was strangulated. Now, the thing was that from the very beginning, the police officers, the investigators claimed that they knew that it was suicide, that it was mass suicide. But there was a lot of pressure from politicians, from media, from people, and in fact, even for the family. There were family members who were doing interviews with the media and they were telling that they were happy, just few weeks ago, they celebrated Priyanka's engagement. What could have gone wrong in that time for them to commit suicide? Like for all of them to commit suicide, it was so unbelievable. So they all suspected that there was some foul play and it was a murder, like they were all murdered. Also, when they got to know that the investigators were investigating this case from a suicidal perspective, they got really mad because they believed, they in fact accused the investigators that they don't want to do hard work, they just want to close this case and shut it down and put it in a locker. They don't really want to investigate and find out the real truth or give them the justice. Now, because of all of these accusations and pressure, the police finally registered this case as a murder. Now, there are a lot of valid points why the police were suspecting from the very beginning that it was mass suicide. For instance, sign of forced entry. Everything looked proper. In fact, whatever jewelries the women or the kids or the men were wearing, they were all intact. Nothing looked stolen. All the furnitures and everything were in the perfect order. Nothing looked disturbed. Second point to be mentioned over here was that they found a surveillance camera in front of their house. Now, when they checked the previous night's footage, they found out that after 9 p.m., nobody, like no outsider, entered their house. In fact, they saw that the two teenagers, the youngest kids over here, Dhruv and Shivam, who were 15 at the time, they were carrying the wires. Now, these were the same wires that were used to tie their hands and their feet. Also, they saw two women carrying the very same stools which were found in the premises, and I guess there were 5 stools, so basically 2 people were using one stool to hang themselves. Now, this was there. The third point that they brought out was that, for instance, let's just think that it was a murder. So for one person to be murdered, there has to be minimum 2 people. 2 people were definitely required minimum to murder one human over here. So if we go with the statistics, that meant that 11 people and per person 1, then it means that there has to be 22 people who murdered these 11 people. Now, we are talking about Delhi. We are talking about a densely populated area in Delhi. And it's not like one of those countryside places or a village, where the houses are miles and kilometers apart. So the neighbors would have no idea. The walls of the neighboring houses literally stick with each other. So how is it possible that 22 people entered the house, murdered these 11, and the neighbors had no idea and they had no inkling of all of this happening? So yes, all of these points directed towards one fact only, that it was a suicide and that there was no outsider involved. But yes, they were also investigating that there is a possibility that someone might have brainwashed them, like they were suspecting occult and black magic stuffs from the very beginning. Also, the only surviving member over here was Tommy, their pet dog, who was chained just above the rods from where these people were hanging. So imagine he could see all of this happening from the very beginning. A lot of people also say that if he were not chained, then he could have saved them. But anyways, when the animal rescuers arrived at the scene, they found out that he had high fever. He was immediately taken to a vet, and then eventually he was moved to an animal shelter in Noida. But unfortunately, he died on 22nd of July 2018 because of a heart attack. Now back to the case. When the forensic team arrived at the scene, they started looking for any evidence that they could find that would direct them as to what happened and why did they do this. So the very same day, they found a Havan Kund in front of their temple. Now in most of the Hindu families, we have this small room, or a part of the room is used as a temple where we do all the worshipping and everything. Now over there, they found a Havan Kund, which implied that the previous night, the family had done some sort of ritual. Also, when they were going through the various stuffs present in the temple, they found 11 registers or diaries which were handwritten. Now, the moment they saw it, they knew that this was the key to all of the questions that we had. Now, the first diary entry was written in 2007, somewhere after Bhopal Singh's death. And the last entry was written on 30th of June 2018. That was just the day before their bodies were found. Now, before I start off with the entire diary and the dynamics of it, I want to talk about Lalit over here, because Lalit plays a huge role. Basically, he's the lead role of the Burari case. Now Lalit, he was the youngest of the son, but after Bhopal Singh's death, he became the Mukhya, like we say in Hindi. He became the head of the family. Now, Lalit Singh had to go through a lot of issues, lot of obstructions. When he was younger, when he was studying medicine in a private medical college, he actually had a motorbike accident in which he had a severe head injury. After some time, when he recovered, he eventually dropped out from the medical college and along with his family moved to Delhi. Now, when he was in Delhi, he started working in this plywood store. Now, in 2004, he had this incident. So we don't know exactly what happened, but basically he got into a fight, into an argument with the owners of the plywood store that he was working for. And what these people did was, they pushed him under several plywoods, locked him in the room and set the room on fire. Somehow he was saved. He did not really have any major physical or severe physical injury, but he lost his voice after this incident. Now, according to the doctors, there was no physical injury on his larynx or any part of his body that might have led him to lose his voice. So it was all because of some psychological reason. In fact, one of their doctors also suggested him to see a therapist, but he did not. Now, this was in 2004, and for the next 2.5, 3 years, he did not utter a single word out loud. In fact, when his son was born, he did not say a word then as well. In 2007, Bhopal Singh, the father, who is to be called Daddy by everyone, when he died because of some natural reason, I think he had some sort of respiratory illness, he had a dream. Lalit had a dream about Bhopal Singh, his own father. And in his dream, Bhopal Singh was asking him to do a puja every day, and that way he would be able to get his voice back. Now, he told this to his family. I don't know exactly how. Maybe he wrote it somewhere. So anyways, the family from that day onwards, every day they would sit together and they would chant some mantras and do this puja. Now, one of these days, all of a sudden, the family noticed that Lalit's voice had gotten back. So they could hear him saying the word Om, and he was repeating it again and again. And that is when people realized that it was a miracle, that Bhopal Singh indeed came in his dream and instructed them to do this puja. And this was very happy moment for everyone because A, Daddy was here, and B, Lalit's voice was back. I guess this was the point when everybody started trusting Lalit, like his words that Bhopal Singh would come in his dream. But that was the early days. Eventually, Bhopal Singh's spirit would come in his body and Lalit became a medium. And whenever Bhopal Singh would do that, like his spirit would do that, his voice would change drastically and he would sound like Bhopal Singh. So everybody believed it was Daddy indeed. Now back to the diaries. Now when the investigators were going through the diaries, they found out that the language was very strict. In fact, sometimes it was scolding-like as well, and it was instructive. Now, Bhopal Singh was described as someone who was very authoritative, and it pretty much looked like that even after his death, that his spirit was commanding the very same respect that he used to have when he was alive. Now, there were a lot of instructions. Now, the diary was dictated by Lalit, and most of the time it was written by Neetu or Menaka. Now, the diaries basically was an almanac. It was, a kind of a guidebook, and they had to follow it everything. They had to follow all the instructions. It would dictate them how to go around with their everyday mundane stuffs. In fact, they also stopped cooking and eating non-vegetarian food inside the house. Bhavnesh also stopped drinking alcohol inside. Also, there were a lot of entries which would say like, Dhruv is spending a lot of time on his phone, so correct him for that. And then he would talk about his daughter-in-laws. Like, for instance, he would say that, Tina, calm your temper. So you have to be a good mother, a good daughter-in-law, and a good wife. So he had all of these instructions. And then he would talk about like, Bhopal Singh's spirit would talk about Lalit. He would go on saying that, listen to what Lalit says. He knows better. Do not upset him. He will be fine, Listen to what Lalit says. Take care of Lalit and Tina. And these were not just instructions, they were advices regarding to their business as well. They were financially growing, especially after Bhopal Singh's death. Their financial status grew rapidly. From one store in Delhi, it became 3 different stores. And in fact, Priyanka's arranged marriage, even in that, Bhopal Singh had a lot to say. Now, on the day of Priyanka's engagement, that is on 17th of June 2018, a lot of people, like a lot of friends and family members, they noticed that Lalit was not behaving like himself. Lalit was described as someone who was very humorous, but at the same time quite reserved and private, and he would never compromise on principles. He was a no-nonsense man. But that day, he was acting all quiet, like he was not interested, and he was very sleepy. In fact, Ali, who used to work in Lalit's plywood store, he said that a week before their deaths, Lalit stopped coming to the store quite often, and most of the time he would spend at his home sleeping. Now, in one of their last entries, Bhopal Singh instructs them to do Bar Tapasya. Now, Bar is a banyan tree, and Tapasya, I don't know exactly the translation in English, but I think it is penance. So they had to do this banyan tree ritual. And remember, all of these people were hanging from the ceilings, and it pretty much looked like they were in a circular formation, and they looked like the branches of a banyan tree. So this banyan tree ritual was to be done to thank God, and all of the steps of this ritual was explained in details. For instance, the ritual had to be done at night, and the mother, as in Narayani Devi, had to feed everyone a roti, a chapati. And the investigators also found out a bill receipt from a local restaurant. They had gotten food the previous night. So after feeding them all, Lalit had to help everyone to hang from the ceilings. Their eyes had to be blindfolded, they had to be gagged, their hands and feet had to be tied. Now, after all of this was done, Lalit had to use some kind of a stick to do a gesture. That meant the ritual has begun. The ritual would last for 5 to 15 minutes. Also, they had to place a bowl of water outside, and when the color of the water would change, then Bhopal Singh would come and he would free everyone, and then everyone would help each other to take off the knots. Now, with Narayani Devi, Bhopal Singh specified that since she was really old, then she won't be able to hang herself. So that way, she had to be lied down on the floor and the ritual had to be done. He also asked the adults to instruct the kids that no matter what happens, they have to keep on chanting the mantra, and all they have to think about is 0, nothing. And the entire ritual would end in 5 to 15 minutes. After that, everything will be back to normal. Now, according to the police, Lalit and Tina, they were the last person who hanged themselves because unlike others, their knots were pretty loose. Also, I would like to read out something from the diary which really is goosebumpish. अंतिम समय में आखिरी इच्छा की पूर्ति के वक्त आसमान हिलेगी, धरती कांपेगी. उस वक्त तुम घबराना मत, मंत्र का जाप बढ़ा देना. मैं आकर उतार लूंगा और को भी उतारने में मदद करूंगा. Which translates to, in your last hours, while your last wish is fulfilled, the sky will open up and the earth will shake. Don't panic, but start chanting the mantra loud. I will come to save you and others. I don't know, it's just the kind of the narration, the language used over here, it feels very outworldly, like it sounds very paranormal. I don't know about you. Now, a very important point to be mentioned over here is that nowhere in this entire ritual explanation there was any mentioning of death or life sacrifice or anything of such. So basically it means that they believed that they would do this ritual and they would come out alive. They had no idea that they are going to die. Now this is like, it raises a lot of questions and I would come to that later. But first, let's talk about numerology over here, because a lot of people believe that there is this one particular number which plays a huge role, like which is very constant in the entire case, and that is number 11. So there are 11 members in the family. They've been writing these 11 diaries for the past 11 years. Also, some people noticed that there were 11 pipes that were protruding from one of the walls to an empty plot. Now, 7 of these pipes were bent and there were 7 females. And 4 of these pipes were straight and there were 4 males. And these had no inlet or outlet. It did not connect to any sort of water supply. So people assumed, or people have this conspiracy theory, have this theory that these pipes were basically a channel for their spirits to go, like for their spirits to go free, you know. I don't know how much of it is true. Also, there's this thing about 11 rods being on their main door. But according to Dinesh, who is the oldest brother, he himself is a civil contractor, and he said in a media interview that he was the one who suggested his brothers to get those pipes so they could get some sort of ventilation. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because most of these pipes are bent downwards, so I don't know, maybe there's some science behind it. But anyways, there's that. Also, the person who built all those bars and the rods, which were supposedly 11 in number, he said that it's just a coincidence. Like, he was not instructed to put 11 rods specifically. They just fit. So yeah, maybe they have some connection. Maybe there's some manifestation that they were not aware of. I don't know. I don't know about numerology a lot. Back to the case was shut. Now the biggest question was, if they were not murdered, then was it a suicide? It cannot be even said as a suicide, like a mass suicide, because they had no idea that they were gonna die. So then what it is, because there has to be something. So it was shut down as a case of accidental death. Like I said, they had no idea and it was an accident that they died. With their normal autopsy, the crime branch also decided to do a psychological autopsy on them. Now, according to various therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, people, experts from that field, Lalit, who had undergone a lot of physical and mental trauma, he had psychosis. And one of the first signs of psychosis is delusion, is hallucinations. So basically, the entire time that he thought that he was dreaming about his dead father, or his father's spirit was coming inside him and instructing him about, very basic things, it was all of his delusions and nothing else. And all of these people following him, it can be said that this is a case of mass delusional disorder or mass psychosis. But the thing is that we cannot say it for sure because you cannot psychologically diagnose a dead person, at least that's what I think. Now let's talk about the questions. I have so many questions over here. Let's start with Narayani Devi. So according to the diaries and according to the investigators, the Chundawats did not have any idea that they were gonna end up being dead. Then how is it possible that the person who was strangulating Narayani Devi expected her to be alive even after that? Like, how did it not click to him or her? And most probably it was Lalit, because he was the one who was supposed to be coordinating the entire ritual. So how come when she was being strangulated, when she was being tied with that dupatta, he never questioned that she might end up dying right now or maybe after a minute or two because there was no oxygen supply. And there could be so many other possibilities. So he had to know that it was a murder, that he was killing or she was killing Narayani Devi. So that is the biggest question that I have. Like, how come they did not question this? The second thing is the kids. There were 2 teenagers, Dhruv and Shivam, who were 15 years old. Then there was Priyanka, who used to work in an IT company. There was Menaka and Neetu, who were in college and they had college degrees. There was Tina, Lalit's wife, who had master's degree in sociology. These educated people, how come they never questioned all of this? How come they never questioned if it was really happening or is it some sort of psychological disorder, mental illness? How come they not questioned it? And also, over that, nobody said this out loud to anybody else outside the house. For 11 years. How come these kids did not talk about this to an outsider? To not even a friend, or maybe one of their relatives to whom they were close to. So it's like mind-blowing to even think that for 11 years they were able to keep it as a secret. Maybe it was a fear, maybe out of respect, maybe they really believed what Lalit was saying. Now the last thing over here, it's not really a question but more of a conspiracy theory. So a lot of people believe, or they say, that Lalit knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that everyone was going to end up dead. Now the reason why he might have done this was because he was scared. Like when Priyanka got engaged, he had this fear that once Priyanka would get married, then their little family secret won't be secret anymore and everybody would get to know about this. And he did not wanted it to happen. So he decided to just kill everyone. So yes, if this is what happened, then it's not an accidental death, but murder. So I know it's like too many things happening, and like I said, it's a shut case, it's a solved case according to the investigators, but in my eyes, it's not solved. Knowing the cause of death does not mean that it is solved. We have to find out, like we should know the reason behind this, what exactly happened, and there are so many questions. So yes, I see it as an unsolved case. Now currently the house is under Dinesh, the oldest brother, and there's a doctor's family who's living on the ground floor. They also run a small laboratory, and there's Ali with his brother. Ali is the person who used to work for Lalit in his plywood store. As soon as the police handed over them the keys, he started living in the house. Also, it was kind of a statement to everyone who said that it was a haunted house. So yes, here we come to the end of this case. It's a very depressing case and a very dark one. To imagine, there's actually a picture of Dinesh doing the ritual, the Hindu funeral ritual, and it is so sad to imagine the place, the position he was in, like to do the cremation of 11 of his family members. It's just leaves me speechless, and I feel so sorry for the kids, especially because they had so much in their lives, and I don't know if they had any say in all of these things happening. So here we come to the end of this case, and yes, I would actually love to sit down with 11 people, like more than 11 people actually, and discuss about this case. It would be so interesting, but we can't do that. So put them in the comment section. Tell me what you think about it. Do you have any questions? Do you have anything to add? If you have any suggestions, you can also put them over here. Or if you just want to talk, random chit chat, then you can directly message me on my Instagram handle. And that's all for the day. If you found this video informative, do hit the like button. Also subscribe if you haven't. And most importantly, take care of yourself. Be positive. Happy Diwali. Bye bye.